Sup, chooms, how y'all living? Hope everything is Nova and you're all having a preem week. So, my channel has been around long enough that people have started associating it with certain cultures within the online manosphere. Oftentimes, people have said that my content is black-pilled, which is a label I wholeheartedly reject for both myself and my channel. So, what is the black pill, and what does it mean to be black-pilled? Let me take a moment to explain the origins of the black pill. As many of you chooms know, the idea of ascribing sets of beliefs to metaphorical pill ingestions leading to lingo like red pill, blue pill, black pill, etc., it all derives from the 1999 film called The Matrix. There's definitely something funny and ironic about the fact that the ideology of so many edgy dude bros and alpha males is derived from a source material like The Matrix, which is a fictional universe that was created by two transgendered women. But pill philosophies have become popular enough that they've become an established trope in the English vernacular, so like it or not, they are here to stay. If you remember The Matrix, there were only two pills, the red pill and the blue pill. These pills were offered to Neo by Morpheus, and taking them was meant as a symbolic gesture on behalf of Neo to signify his desire to either embrace the harsh reality of the world as it really is by taking the red pill, or go back to believing a more comfortable lie by taking the blue pill. It's possible this concept was inspired by an earlier movie, Total Recall, which was another sci-fi action movie that came out 9 years before The Matrix, where the starring character, Douglas Quaid, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, is offered a pill that just so happens to be red that he is instructed to take as a symbol of his desire to return to reality. Years after the Matrix franchise was ruined by its terrible sequels, the metaphorical pill concept somehow became popular again on the internet, probably around the late 2000s. Internet denizens would speak positively about taking the red pill or being red-pilled as a sign that someone is embracing reality, even if the truth is uncomfortable. The idea of the blue pill during this time was and still is used almost exclusively as a pejorative, with people accusing other people of being blue-pilled for either ignoring reality or interpreting situations as they wish they were rather than how they really are. After enough time, though, this dichotomy between red and blue was broken, and people from various communities started embellishing the concept with other metaphorical colored pills. White-pilled, green-pilled, purple-pilled, pink-pilled, you pick a color. I'm sure it exists. There is now a colored pill for every belief system these days, and everybody is popping ideology pills like candy. None of these pills, though, have gained nearly as much popularity or perhaps as much notoriety as the black pill. The black pill has its roots in anti-SJW trolling and incel culture that peaked around the Gamergate era when the internet was at its very worst. The black pill has different interpretations that are debated to this day, but the general idea of the black pill is an awakening to a harsh reality similar to the red pill, but unlike the red pill, the black pill takes a nihilistic stance, believing that the situation is too far gone for any kind of meaningful change to happen and that there is no hope. So, when people say they are black-pilled, what that usually means is that they are beyond the point of trying to improve the situation. All they can do is just spread their misery to others and blame their problems on other people. Now, to be fair, I don't think the black pill is never applicable. I can imagine certain circumstances where the black pill would apply, like if you were sentenced to death or life in prison without the possibility of parole. If that happened to me, I would probably take the black pill too. But the big problem with black-pilled people is that most of their problems actually can be solved through self-improvement or various other ways, but they've allowed themselves to be convinced that there is no hope for them. Oftentimes, this can have tragic consequences. So black-pilled ideology in general is very harmful to people, especially to impressionable young men who are very quick to catastrophize a problem that they feel they don't have any control over. Even though there are various interpretations of the black pill, the defining characteristic of the black pill is hopelessness, and I couldn't think of anything more dangerous to a human being's mental health than stripping them of their hope. That is one of the many reasons why I absolutely despise the black pill ideology. It discourages people, especially men, from being proactive about their problems, and it convinces them that it's pointless because there is no hope. So, this is a science-based channel, of course, not a philosophy channel. So like always, I did some research on the science of hope versus hopelessness. It turns out there is a whole lot of research on the positive effect of hope for the treatment of many different forms of physical and mental illnesses, including depression, PTSD, and even lung cancer, believe it or not, and I'll link those articles below. In fact, there is a whole scientific theory of depression called the hopelessness theory of depression that postulates that it is hopelessness itself that is the major cause cause of depression. The bottom line behind the science here, chums, is that hope is therapeutic, but hopelessness is about the worst thing you can possibly have if you have any mental or physical health problems. That is why taking the black pill is about the worst thing you can possibly do if you have any kind of pre-existing health problem, mental or otherwise. Now, of course, I'm not recommending the blue pill. I'm not saying you should ignore reality. There are some things we can't control about our body and our mind, and most people are not genetic lottery winners. Almost everybody has something about themselves they wish was better. Some men wish they were taller, some wish they were younger, some wish they had a better jawline, better ocular structure, a deeper voice, a bigger dick, you name it. I'm sure even Chads have some features about themselves they may feel insecure about. So perfection is not achievable for most people, but nobody needs to be perfect. We just need to be better. And even if there is something we don't like about ourselves that we can't improve, chances are there are at least a few things about ourselves that we can improve. The most obvious example of such a trait is one that is the foundation of this channel, our hair. Hair loss is a disease that negatively impacts hundreds of millions of men, yet the majority of them never end up saving their hair. Their decision to go bald can be due to a variety of different reasons. Some of them don't care, some may see it as too much of a hassle, and some may even decide that they like the bald look and decide to embrace it, as you see on the Bald Cafe channel. And you know what? God bless those people. Even though the bald look isn't for me personally, bald people don't deserve to be miserable, and I'm glad that they found happiness as part of their newfound identity. But what about the people who go bald and wish that they hadn't gone bald? Why do they let themselves get that way? Could it be due to ignorance? That's possible, but that seems pretty unlikely these days, especially considering the ubiquity of hair loss drugs. If you just Google hair loss treatments, you can find all sorts of information about clinically proven hair loss treatments like finasteride and minoxidil, and with the advent of telehealth companies like Keeps and Hims, it's nearly impossible not to stumble into some advertisement on TV, magazines, newspapers, or the internet that features information about hair loss treatments. So, why is it that it is easier today to stop hair loss than it has ever been in human history, yet most men still end up going bald? Well, I think the reason for that is hopelessness, largely driven by online black-pilled internet dogma. Someone who is red-pilled about hair loss like me would tell someone that yes, of course hair loss sucks, but you can do something about it. They would mention treatments like finasteride and minoxidil and give you a realistic breakdown of the risk-to-reward ratio and let you decide if you think the minor risk of side effects is worth it. But someone who is black-pilled, on the other hand, will tell you that hair loss sucks, but they'll also say that you can't practically do anything about it because finasteride can completely destroy your life by giving you irreversible sexual dysfunction, brain fog, and depression that will drive you to suicide. So they tell people the cure is worse than the disease. So just think about the dilemma this creates for people who realize they're losing their hair when they're exposed to this kind of black-pilled rhetoric. They're being told that they have no choice but to live with androgenic alopecia, a condition they hate because they've been convinced that the drug that treats that condition is the pharmacological equivalent to Russian roulette. So therefore, they think they have no good options, and thus any attempts to deal with hair loss are completely futile. Some may try to cope by telling themselves they'd look good bald, but that's just trading the black pill for the blue pill. Sure, some people can pull the bald look off, but the bald look isn't for everyone. A lot of people have big foreheads or lumpy looking heads that are totally unnoticeable under a cover of hair, but which look unattractive when there is no hair coverage. Hair is what frames a handsome face, so lacking that frame is a cosmetic defect that not everybody can compensate for. Also, even if people do like the bald or shaved look, it's possible they might prefer a different look later in life, so losing their hair strips them of their agency in determining their own appearance. So, when you hear people blackpilling finasteride by saying it has a high risk of side effects that can be permanent, it isn't just harmful because it scares people away from treatment, it's also harmful because of what it does to people who do take finasteride in spite of what they hear from black-pilled communities, because they end up living in fear that something like Post-Finasteride Syndrome could happen to them at any moment in their lives. That can actually be a self-fulfilling prophecy due to what's known as the Nocebo effect. The Nocebo effect is a well-documented and scientifically proven medical phenomenon that is especially applicable to finasteride. There is scientific research that shows that people who are warned about finasteride side effects before using it are significantly more likely to experience them, and the subjects in those studies were only told about the drug's real side effects. So So you can only imagine how dramatic the difference would be if they were told that the drug could ruin their lives. But what do you think happens when someone takes finasteride if they sincerely believe that post-finasteride syndrome is a real condition? What do you think will go through their mind if they're taking finasteride and then maybe one day they get a case of erectile dysfunction or they start experiencing depression for whatever reason? What's going to happen is that they're going to immediately conclude that they had post-finasteride syndrome, and that is going to lead them down the PFS rabbit hole where they will encounter communities who will tell them that their condition is permanent and that they will have to suffer these adverse effects for the rest of their lives. Let me ask you a rhetorical question, chums. What do you think this is going to do to people who already have a mentally fragile state to begin with? I don't think I need to spell it out for you. Now, I am well aware that there have been people who have taken their own lives after using finasteride, and I want to make it very crystal clear that I think every one of those losses is an absolute tragedy. I grieve and I pray for all of them and their families. When I hear people from the PFS community go on social media or even go to the real media and then make subtle or direct implications that I and my content had some role in these individuals' tragic decision to take their own lives, it is deeply offensive to me, especially as someone who has suffered from depression himself. When I hear about these people and about the tragic decision to end their own lives, I actually see a bit of myself in them. If I had taken finasteride without any confidence in the safety of the drug, I think I could have easily been manipulated by these black pill PFS communities into thinking that the drug had destroyed my life. If they were to have convinced me that there was no hope other than praying for some cure that could maybe sometime happen in the distant future, but only if I gave them money for some research they were planning, then I think that could have been enough to drive me over the edge too, especially back then when I was in my 20s and early 30s and had a lot of mental health and economic struggles in my life. So when I criticize the PFS community, I do so because I think they either knowingly or not are making the situation worse rather than better. They are instilling a sense of hopelessness into men who may be depressed for any number of reasons. They might even be just depressed because they are continuing to lose their hair, because it has got to be extremely depressing thinking you can't take the only drugs that are proven to work long term, specifically finasteride or dutasteride. Of course, I know the PFS community would fiercely deny all of this, and they would insist that they're only trying to help, and I think a lot of them really do believe that, but I don't think they realize what they're doing to the mental health of these young men when they're insisting, without any kind of scientific evidence or medical diagnosis, that all these people coming to them are afflicted with a terrible permanent condition that has no cure. At the same time, they're telling these people that I'm some callous sociopath trying to build clout on their suffering. I don't find this subject fun or funny, and for the most part, I don't wish to mock or demean anyone who feels that their problems are all due to finasteride. I think in some cases the claims are so ridiculous, though, that they do deserve some form of mockery, like when people claim that finasteride changed their sexual orientation or made them transgendered somehow. But I believe that most people who think they have post-finasteride syndrome are innocent people who have serious problems and they desperately need medical or psychological help. The big problem, though, is how can they ever get help for themselves when they're blackpilled and given this nihilistic explanation for their problems with post-finasteride syndrome? If you strip a person of their hope, then they're not going to seek help, because what's the point in seeking help if you think that there is no hope for you? And then to go on and tell these men that they should help themselves by donating to organizations to fund some dubious studies that may possibly lay the foundation for help in the distant future is disingenuous and inappropriate. It's really just financially exploiting these people's misery by taking advantage of them after they've reached the lowest point in their lives. The actual red-pilled reality of post-finasteride syndrome is that every symptom that can be attributed to PFS is treatable, but none of these people are going to be able to help themselves so long as they're convinced that nothing else could possibly be causing their problems and that their problems are incurable and permanent. In fact, if anyone in the PFS community even claims that they've successfully treated or cured themselves, they're considered charlatans and ostracized from the community. I talked about one person on my channel about 2 years ago, and I'm not going to mention him by name because the guy hates my guts even though I don't hate him back. But back in that video, I said that the PFS community would stab him in the back if he ever found a solution to his problems, which he did. And like I predicted, they did stab him in the back. So, I'm not convinced that these communities actually want to help anyone. The only thing they really care about is trying to convince the world that post-finasteride syndrome is real, and that is why they don't ever consider any other factors for these people's problems, Even though conditions like erectile dysfunction, low libido, and depression are highly multifactorial and very common conditions, not to mention all these conditions are treatable. Erectile dysfunction, it's treatable. Just use a PDE5 inhibitor like Viagra, Cialis, or Levitra. Depression, also treatable. It's treatable through psychological therapy and non-prescription drugs. And there are also non-SSRI antidepressants out there too, since I know SSRIs are controversial. Low libido, you can go on TRT, or you can use an apomorphine drug like Uprima. Brain fog, regular exercise, sufficient sleep, abstaining from alcohol, and other interventions can help you. All these conditions can be improved if you seek appropriate care from medical professionals, but you can't be treated if you immerse yourself in a community that tells you there is no treatment and will lambast you if you insist there is a treatment. The whole idea of post-finasteride syndrome is predicated on the idea that the symptoms are permanent. So any claims that the symptoms of post-finasteride syndrome can be treated is anathema to the organizations that promote the condition, because those organizations' existence is contingent on the idea that post-finasteride syndrome exists. And because of that, they will never allow anyone to claim that they can be cured, even if it means convincing other people that there is no hope for them and that their lives are completely over. Now, to throw a bone to the PFS people, I will admit that the black-pilled tactics of the PFS community have upset me enough in the past to the point where I have sometimes generated content and thumbnails that gave the impression that I was mocking the real victims of all of this, those who have been convinced that they have an irreversible condition. Oftentimes, I did that out of anger because of the things the PFS community has said about me, but I want to emphasize very strongly that the kind of content I made was only meant to be targeted against the most toxic elements of the PFS community. I'm talking about the people who don't just believe PFS is real, but will actually shame and bully people who use finasteride by making claims that they're taking a tranny drug and push big pharma conspiracy theories. All this black-pilled propaganda is against the spirit of my channel, which is not to give in to hopelessness, but to provide hope that men and women can overcome their hair loss by taking a positive approach that works for them. Any anger I or anyone else has should always be aimed at the groups taking advantage of these tragic victims who are sharing the victims' stories to promote their own aims, but never at the victims themselves. I know I am not always the perfect messenger, of course, but my goals have always been to help people, especially the people who have been victimized by anti-finasteride propaganda. So this video was more of an opinion piece than usual, but I felt I had to say something to justify my point of view here. So I think I'll go ahead and end the video here, but I do have that skincare video that I promised coming soon, and there's also my 50K subscriber video, which should be fun. So stay tuned, Chooms, because we've got some more preem content coming soon. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.